The snow fell softly on the grounds of Sandringham House as December 31st arrived with its usual promise of renewal and reflection. Inside the grand estate, King Charles III stood at the tall windows of his private study, watching the white flakes dance in the afternoon light. His hands were clasped behind his back, a gesture that had become second nature over the decades of public service and private contemplation. The king's mind was not on the approaching midnight celebration that the world would soon witness. Instead, his thoughts centered on a tradition that few people knew existed, a ceremony that had been passed down through generations of his family but kept carefully hidden from public view. This tradition was more precious to him than any crown jewel, more meaningful than any state occasion. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, knocked gently on the study door before entering. She carried a leather-bound journal in her hands, its pages yellowed with age and its cover worn smooth by countless fingers that had held it before hers. "Your Majesty," she said with a warm smile, "it's time." Charles turned from the window, his face lighting up with genuine joy. The formal address felt unnecessary between them, but Catherine understood the importance of maintaining proper protocol, especially during moments that carried such deep significance. "Ah, Catherine," he replied, his voice carrying the warmth of a grandfather speaking to a beloved daughter. "Is everyone gathered?" "William is helping the children finish their preparations," Catherine explained, setting the journal carefully on the king's mahogany desk. "Princess Anne arrived an hour ago, and the Duke of Edinburgh is reviewing the family records in the library. Queen Camilla is making sure the kitchen staff understands their role in tonight's proceedings." The king nodded approvingly. This coordination required delicate timing and absolute discretion. The staff members who participated in this annual tradition had been carefully chosen for their loyalty and their ability to maintain confidentiality. Many had served the royal family for decades, their own families becoming part of the extended network that protected these sacred moments. "And the preparations in the blue drawing room?" Charles asked, though he already knew the answer. Every detail had been planned months in advance, just as it had been every year for the past 7 decades. "Everything is exactly as your grandmother would have wanted," Catherine assured him. "The chairs are arranged in the circle, the candles are ready to be lit, and the family artifacts are displayed on the center table." Charles felt a familiar tightness in his throat whenever someone mentioned his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. She had been the keeper of these traditions, the one who had taught him their true meaning and importance. When she passed away, the responsibility had fallen to him, along with the weight of ensuring that these precious customs continued to bring the family together in ways that royal duties and public appearances never could. The tradition had begun during World War II, when Charles's great-grandmother, Queen Mary, had decided that the royal family needed something to anchor them during the uncertainty and fear of those dark years. She had been a woman of deep faith and strong convictions, someone who understood that true strength came not from crowns or titles, but from the bonds between people who loved and supported each other. Queen Mary had established the New Year's Eve ceremony as a time for the family to come together without the burden of public expectation or royal protocol. It was to be a moment when they could be simply human, sharing their fears and hopes, their failures and triumphs, their dreams for the future and their gratitude for the past. As Charles made his way through the corridors of Sandringham, he passed portraits of his ancestors, men and women who had carried the weight of the crown through times of war and peace, prosperity and hardship. Each of them had participated in this tradition when they were alive, adding their own stories to the growing tapestry of royal family history that was recorded in the leather journal Catherine had carried. The blue drawing room had been transformed for the evening. The usual formal furniture had been rearranged to create an intimate circle of comfortable chairs. Soft lighting from dozens of candles created a warm, almost mystical atmosphere that seemed to transport everyone who entered into a different world, one where titles and ranks held no meaning. In the center of the circle, a round table held items that represented the family's journey through the past year. There was a small silver frame containing a photograph from Prince George's recent school play, where he had played a shepherd in the nativity scene. Next to it sat a pressed flower from the garden at Highgrove House, where Charles had spent many peaceful hours tending to his beloved plants. A small wooden carving, made by Princess Charlotte during her art classes, represented the creative spirit that flowed through the family. William, the Prince of Wales, entered the room carrying his youngest son, Prince Louis, while Prince George and Princess Charlotte followed closely behind. The children's eyes widened as they took in the magical atmosphere of the room. This would be only their second time participating in the full ceremony, as the family had decided that children should be at least 6 years old before joining this sacred tradition. "Grandpapa," Princess Charlotte said, running to Charles and wrapping her arms around his legs, "it looks like a fairy tale in here." Charles knelt down to her level, his face glowing with affection. That's exactly what your great-great-great-grandmother intended, my dear, he told her. She wanted this to be a place where magic could happen, where we could share the stories that make our family who we are. Princess Anne arrived with her characteristic efficiency, carrying a small wooden box that contained items her own children had contributed to previous ceremonies. The Duchess of Edinburgh followed, accompanied by her husband, both of them moving with the quiet reverence that this tradition inspired in everyone who participated. Queen Camilla was the last to enter, and she carried with her a sense of peaceful authority that had taken years to develop. When she had first joined the family, she had been nervous about participating in such an intimate tradition, unsure of her place in the long line of royal women who had helped maintain these customs. But, over time, she had come to understand that her role was not to replace anyone who had come before, but to add her own unique contribution to the family's story. As everyone took their seats in the circle, Charles remained standing. The room fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the soft crackling of the fireplace and the occasional whisper of wind against the windows. Outside, the world continued its preparations for the public celebrations that would mark the arrival of the new year. Inside this room, time seemed to move differently, more slowly and deliberately. "We gather tonight," Charles began, his voice carrying the weight of tradition and the warmth of family love, "as our family has gathered for more than 80 years. We come together not as king and queen, not as prince and princess, but as people who share blood and love and hope for the future." He picked up the leather journal from the center table and opened it carefully. The first page contained an entry written in his great-grandmother's elegant handwriting, describing the first New Year's Eve ceremony in 1943. Her words spoke of fear for the future, gratitude for the family's safety, and hope that the tradition they were beginning would help future generations stay connected to what truly mattered. "Queen Mary wrote that she wanted this tradition to remind us that we are more than our titles," Charles continued, reading from the yellowed pages. "She wanted us to remember that our greatest strength comes not from the power we hold over others, but from the love we share with each other." Young Prince George raised his hand slightly, a gesture that made the adults smile. Even in this informal setting, his natural politeness shone through. "Grandpapa," he said, "what did people write about during the war?" Charles flipped through several pages, his eyes scanning the entries that had been made during those difficult years. "They wrote about missing family members who were serving in the military," he explained. "They wrote about their fears for the future of the country and their hopes that the fighting would end soon. But they also wrote about small moments of joy, a particularly beautiful sunrise, a letter from a friend, a moment when one of the children said something funny that made everyone laugh." Princess Charlotte leaned forward in her chair, completely absorbed in the story. "Did they write about sad things too?" "Yes, my darling," Charles replied gently. "They wrote about losses and disappointments, about times when they felt scared or uncertain. But they also wrote about how sharing these feelings with the family made them feel less alone and more hopeful." William shifted Prince Louis to a more comfortable position on his lap. The youngest prince was fighting sleep, his head drooping against his father's chest. "Should we take him to bed?" William asked quietly. "Let him stay," Charles said with a soft smile. "Some of our most important family moments happen when we think no one is paying attention. He may not remember the words we say tonight, but he'll remember the feeling of being surrounded by people who love him." Queen Camilla reached into her handbag and pulled out a small notebook. "I've been keeping track of special moments throughout the year," she said, "just as your grandmother taught me to do. Would you like me to share some of them?" The family nodded eagerly. Camilla's contributions to the tradition had become particularly cherished because she brought an outsider's perspective to the royal family's experiences, helping them see ordinary moments through fresh eyes. In March, she began consulting her notes. Charles spent an entire afternoon teaching George how to plant seeds in the garden at Highgrove. George was determined to grow the tallest sunflower anyone had ever seen. When one of the seeds sprouted after just 5 days, he ran through the house shouting, "It's alive! It's alive," loud enough for the security team to come running. Everyone laughed, including George, who blushed slightly at the memory. "I was very excited," he said in his defense. In June, Camilla continued. Charlotte insisted on making breakfast for the entire family during a weekend at Balmoral. She was very serious about following the recipe exactly, measuring every ingredient with scientific precision. The pancakes turned out perfectly, but she used salt instead of sugar by accident. Everyone ate them anyway and told her they were delicious. Charlotte giggled, covering her face with her hands. "I was so embarrassed when Mummy told me about the salt." "But we all ate every bite," Catherine said, reaching over to squeeze her daughter's hand. because they were made with love, and that's the most important ingredient in any recipe. Princess Anne opened her wooden box and pulled out a small, handmade bookmark. "This is from Savannah," she explained, referring to one of her grandchildren. "She made it for me after I mentioned that I was reading a particularly long book about horse training. She decorated it with tiny drawings of horses and wrote for the best grandmother and the best horsewoman on the back." The bookmark was passed around the circle, each person examining the careful artwork and thoughtful message. These small tokens had become an important part of the tradition, physical reminders of the moments that made each year special. "I have something too," William said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper that looked like it had been carried around for quite some time. "This is a letter that George wrote to his teacher at the beginning of the school year. She gave me a copy because she thought I would enjoy reading it." William unfolded the letter and cleared his throat. "Dear Mrs. Thompson," he read, "my name is George and I am 7 years old. I live with my family and we have a dog named Orla. My father is a prince, but he is also just my dad. He teaches me how to throw a rugby ball and how to be kind to people. My mother is a princess, but she is also just my mom. She helps me with my homework and makes the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. My grandfather is the king, but he is also just my grandpapa. He tells the best stories and knows everything about plants and animals. I hope you will like being my teacher because I promise to work very hard and ask lots of questions." The room fell silent for a moment as everyone absorbed the innocent wisdom in George's words. Here was a 7-year-old child who understood instinctively what the adults sometimes forgot, that their most important roles had nothing to do with their titles. Charles felt tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. This was exactly what Queen Mary had hoped for when she started the tradition. She had wanted to ensure that future generations of the royal family would understand that their humanity was more important than their status, that their relationships with each other were more valuable than any crown or ceremony. "That," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "is exactly what this tradition is meant to preserve. The understanding that we are, first and foremost, a family." The evening was far from over. They had yet to light the special candles, share their hopes for the coming year, and add new entries to the family journal. But, already, the magic of the tradition was working its way into their hearts, binding them together in ways that no public ceremony or state occasion ever could. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the estate in pristine white. Inside the blue drawing room, a family continued a conversation that had been going on for 8 decades, adding their voices to the chorus of love, hope, and connection that would echo through generations yet to come. The grandfather clock in the corner of the blue drawing room chimed 8 times, its deep, resonant tone marking the passage of another hour in this sacred evening. King Charles looked around the circle of faces illuminated by candlelight, each one dear to him in ways that went far beyond their roles in the monarchy. The leather journal lay open on the center table, waiting for new stories to be added to its pages. "Now comes my favorite part of our tradition," Charles announced, reaching for a small wooden box that sat beside the journal. "The lighting of the remembrance candles." Princess Charlotte sat up straighter in her chair, her eyes bright with anticipation. This was the part of the ceremony she had heard about but never participated in until last year. Each family member would light a candle while sharing a memory of someone who was no longer with them, ensuring that those who had passed away remained part of the family's New Year celebration. Charles opened the wooden box carefully, revealing a collection of small white candles, each one inscribed with a name and elegant gold lettering. These candles had been specially made by the same company that had served the royal family for over a century, their craftsmen understanding the sacred nature of their purpose. "I'll begin," Charles said, selecting a candle marked with his mother's name. He held it carefully, as if it were made of the finest crystal. "This candle is for Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, who taught us all what it means to serve with dignity and love." He moved to the center of the circle and lit his candle from the large pillar candle that stood on the table. The flame danced for a moment before settling into a steady glow. "Mama," he said softly, using the private name he had called her since childhood, "this year has been filled with moments when I heard your voice guiding me, reminding me that the crown is not a burden but an opportunity to make life better for others." He paused, gathering his thoughts as the room remained in respectful silence. "In September, when I was visiting flood victims in Scotland, I met an elderly woman who had lost everything but was still worried about her neighbors who had even less. She reminded me so much of you, Mama, the way you always put others' needs before your own. I could almost hear you whispering in my ear, telling me to spend extra time with her, to really listen to her concerns." Charles placed his candle in a special holder on the table, its light joining the warm glow that filled the room. I miss your wisdom, your gentle humor, and your ability to see the best in every situation. Thank you for teaching us that true strength comes from kindness. William cleared his throat softly, reaching for his own candle. I'd like to light this for my mother, Diana, Princess of Wales, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. This year marked 27 years since we lost her, but she remains as present in our lives as ever. He lit his candle and held it for a moment, watching the flame flicker. In October, when Charlotte asked me why some children don't have homes or enough food, I found myself explaining it exactly the way Mummy would have, with honesty but also with hope, emphasizing what we can do to help rather than feeling overwhelmed by problems that seem too big to solve. William's voice grew stronger as he continued. She taught me that being royal means being responsible, but she also taught me that being a father means being present. This year, I tried to honor both lessons by showing George, Charlotte, and Louis that helping others isn't something we do because we have to, it's something we do because we get to. He placed his candle next to Charles's, the two flames seeming to dance together. I love you, Mummy, and I promise to keep teaching your grandchildren about the power of compassion. Catherine selected her candle with careful deliberation. This is for my grandfather, Peter, who passed away when I was 12, she said. He wasn't royal by birth, but he taught me lessons about dignity and grace that have served me well in this family. She lit her candle and smiled through her tears. Grandpa Peter was a coal miner who never went to university, but he was the wisest person I ever knew. He used to tell me that it doesn't matter where you come from or what titles you have, what matters is how you treat people when no one important is watching. The flame of her candle seemed particularly bright as she continued. This year, when I was feeling overwhelmed by all the public attention and criticism that comes with royal life, I remembered something he used to say, Catherine, love, people will always have opinions about you. Your job isn't to change their minds, it's to keep your heart soft and your conscience clear. She placed her candle on the table with the others. Thank you, Grandpa, for teaching me that true nobility comes from character, not bloodlines. Princess Anne chose her candle with characteristic efficiency, but her eyes betrayed deep emotion. For my father, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, she announced. The man who taught us all that royal duty and personal happiness aren't mutually exclusive. She lit her candle with steady hands. Papa had no patience for self-pity or excessive sentiment, but he had infinite patience for anyone who was genuinely trying their best. This year, when Zara was struggling with some challenges in her equestrian career, I found myself giving her exactly the advice he would have given: stop making excuses, figure out what you can control, and get on with it. And smiled at the memory. But he also taught us that getting on with it doesn't mean going it alone. He showed us how to support each other without making a fuss about it, how to be strong for our family while still accepting help when we need it. She placed her candle firmly on the table. Thank you, Papa, for showing us that love and duty can be the same thing. Queen Camilla hesitated for a moment before selecting her candle. Her relationship with the family's traditions was still evolving, and she sometimes felt uncertain about her place in these deeply personal moments. But the encouraging nods from around the circle gave her confidence. This candle is for my father, Major Bruce Shand, she said, her voice filled with love and pride. He was a military man who understood honor and service, and he would have been amazed to see his daughter participating in royal traditions. She lit her candle carefully. Daddy was incredibly practical and down-to-earth. He used to say that fancy ceremonies were fine, but what really mattered was whether you could look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and feel good about how you treated people. Camilla's voice grew stronger as she spoke. This year, when I was feeling overwhelmed by all the protocol and expectations that come with being queen consort, I remembered his advice: Camilla, just be kind to everyone you meet and work harder than anyone expects you to. The rest will sort itself out. She placed her candle on the table with the others, its flame joining the growing circle of light. Thank you, Daddy, for teaching me that authenticity is more valuable than perfection. Now it was time for the children to participate. Prince George approached the candle box with serious concentration, understanding the importance of the moment even if he couldn't fully grasp all its implications. I want to light this candle for Gongon, he said, using the special name he had called Queen Elizabeth II. She taught me how to be brave even when things are scary. With his father's help, George lit his small candle. Last month, when I had to give a presentation at school about my family, I was really nervous because everyone was staring at me. But then, I remembered how Gongon always stood very straight and smiled when people were watching her, even when she might have been nervous too. George's voice was clear and confident as he continued. She told me once that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared, it means you do the right thing even when you are scared. So I stood up straight like she taught me, and I told everyone about how much I love my family. He carefully placed his candle on the table with great ceremony. Thank you, Gongon, for teaching me that being a prince means being brave for other people. Princess Charlotte selected her candle with determination. This is for great-grandmama Queen Elizabeth, she said, using her own version of the formal title. She taught me that being a princess means helping people feel better. With Catherine's assistance, Charlotte lit her candle. When I was little and fell down and hurt my knee, Gongon didn't just kiss it better, she told me a story about a brave princess who helped other people when they were hurt. She said that's what real princesses do. Charlotte's face glowed in the candlelight as she shared her memory. This year, when my friend at school was crying because her pet rabbit died, I remembered that story. I sat with her and told her about how Gongon said that when we love someone, that love never really goes away, even when we can't see them anymore. She placed her candle carefully among the others. Thank you, great-grandmama, for teaching me that love is the most important thing a princess can share. Even young Prince Louis, who had awakened during the ceremony, was given a special role. William held him securely while Catherine guided his tiny hand to help light a candle for his great-grandmother. Louis giggled as the flame appeared, clapping his hands in delight at the magical sight. Louis may not understand the words yet, Charles observed with a gentle smile, but he's learning the feeling of family love and remembrance. These moments become part of who they are, even before they can articulate what they mean. The table now held a collection of glowing candles, each one representing a life that continued to influence the family even after death. The light they created together was far brighter than any single flame, symbolizing how individual memories combine to form the foundation of family identity. Now, Charles announced, we share our gratitudes for the year that's ending. This part of the tradition had been added by his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, who believed that acknowledging blessings was just as important as remembering losses. Each family member would share 3 things they were grateful for from the past year, 1 personal, 1 family-related, and 1 connected to their royal duties. Catherine volunteered to begin. Personally, I'm grateful for the morning walks I've been taking in the gardens at Adelaide Cottage. Those quiet moments help me start each day with peace and clarity. She looked around the circle with love. For our family, I'm grateful for the way George, Charlotte, and Louis have supported each other this year. Watching them help each other with homework, share toys without being asked, and comfort each other when someone is upset, it reminds me that we're raising children who understand what family really means. Finally, she addressed her royal role. For my public duties, I'm grateful for the opportunity to meet so many remarkable people working in early childhood development. Their passion and dedication inspire me every day and remind me why this work matters so much. William followed his wife's example. Personally, I'm grateful for the flying lessons I've been taking this year. There's something about being up in the sky that gives me perspective on everything else in my life. He smiled at his children. For our family, I'm grateful that we've found ways to give George, Charlotte, and Louis normal childhood experiences while also helping them understand their future roles. Watching them play football with local children or help in the garden at Highgrove shows me they're developing into well-rounded people. His expression grew more serious as he considered his public duties. For my royal work, I'm grateful for the homeless individuals who have shared their stories with me this year. Their courage and resilience in the face of incredibly difficult circumstances has taught me so much about human strength and dignity. The gratitudes continued around the circle, each person sharing moments that had shaped their year and their understanding of their place in the world. Princess Anne spoke about her work with Save the Children and how it had opened her eyes to the remarkable resilience of young people facing adversity. Queen Camilla shared her appreciation for the literacy volunteers she had met and how their dedication had inspired her own efforts to promote reading. Even the children participated, with George expressing gratitude for his soccer teammates who had accepted him without making a fuss about his royal status, and Charlotte sharing her appreciation for her art teacher who had encouraged her creativity without treating her differently from other students. As the last gratitude was shared, Charles stood up and moved to the family journal. Now we add this year's entry to our permanent record, he said, picking up an elegant fountain pen that had belonged to his great-grandfather, King George VI. The journal entry was a collaborative effort, with each family member contributing their thoughts about the year's most significant moments. This year's entry would record the children's growing understanding of their roles, the family's adjustments to Charles's reign, and their continued commitment to the values that had sustained the monarchy for generations. "We are custodians of more than buildings and traditions," Charles wrote in his careful script. "We are custodians of the belief that service to others gives life meaning, that family bonds provide strength for public duties, and that each generation has a responsibility to leave the world better than they found it." As midnight approached and the new year drew near, the family prepared for the final element of their secret tradition, a ceremony that would bind them together in purpose for the year ahead. The ancient grandfather clock began its approach to midnight, its steady tick echoing through the blue drawing room like a heartbeat counting down to the most sacred moment of the royal family's secret New Year tradition. King Charles closed the family journal and looked around the circle of faces, illuminated now by dozens of flickering candles that had been lit in memory of those no longer with them. "The time has come," he announced quietly, "for the covenant of service." This was the tradition's most closely guarded secret, known only to the immediate royal family and never spoken of outside this room. It was a ceremony that Queen Mary had designed during the darkest days of World War II, when she feared that future generations might lose sight of what it truly meant to serve the people of the realm. Queen Camilla rose from her chair and moved to an antique cabinet that stood against the far wall. From its depths, she carefully retrieved a wooden box, its surface polished smooth by decades of handling. The box was made from oak that had been taken from a tree at Windsor Castle, a tree that had been planted during the reign of Queen Victoria and had stood witness to over a century of royal history. Each year, Charles explained to his grandchildren, who watched with wide eyes, "We make promises to each other and to the people we serve. These aren't the kind of promises that get written in newspapers or announced in speeches. These are the promises that guide our hearts." Princess Charlotte raised her hand tentatively. "What kind of promises, Grandpapa?" "The most important kind," he replied with a gentle smile. "Promises about who we want to be, not just what we want to do." Camilla opened the wooden box, revealing its contents to the assembled family. Inside lay a collection of small stones, each one smooth and perfectly round, carved from different materials that represented various aspects of royal service. There was a stone of white marble from Westminster Abbey, symbolizing their connection to faith and tradition. A piece of slate from Wales represented their responsibility to all the nations of the United Kingdom. A fragment of granite from Scotland spoke to their duty to preserve the union that bound the kingdom together. Great-great-grandmother Queen Mary chose these stones, William explained to his children, because she wanted us to remember that our promises should be as solid and lasting as the stones themselves. Charles selected the first stone, holding it in his palm as he had done every year since he was a young man. The weight of it felt familiar and comforting, a physical reminder of the responsibilities he carried and the love that made those responsibilities bearable. "I make this covenant," he began, his voice carrying the authority of kingship but also the vulnerability of a man who understood his own limitations. "In the year ahead, I promise to remember that the crown I wear belongs not to me, but to the people I serve. I promise to approach each decision with humility, knowing that my choices affect millions of lives." He paused, looking directly at each family member in turn. "I promise to be patient with those who disagree with me, compassionate toward those who suffer, and grateful for the privilege of serving. I promise to remember that being king means being the servant of all." Charles placed his stone in a special holder at the center of the table, where it joined the accumulation of promises from previous years. The holder was designed like a small crown, but instead of jewels, it was adorned with stones representing decades of commitments made in this very room. William stood next, selecting his stone with careful consideration. As the heir to the throne, his promises carried the weight of future kingship and present responsibility. "I make this covenant," he said, his voice strong and clear. "In the year ahead, I promise to prepare myself for the day when I will inherit the crown, not by seeking power but by learning wisdom. I promise to support my father as he leads, while never losing sight of the changes our monarchy must make to remain relevant." His eyes moved to his children, who listened with the intensity that children bring to moments they sense are important even if they don't fully understand them. "I promise to be the father my children need while also being the prince my country requires. I promise to teach George, Charlotte, and Louis that privilege brings responsibility, but that responsibility can also bring great joy when it's embraced with the right spirit." William placed his stone beside his father's, the two promises standing together like pillars supporting the same structure. Catherine approached the box with grace, understanding that her promises as a woman who had married into the royal family carried their own unique significance. "I make this covenant," she said, her voice carrying both strength and tenderness. In the year ahead, I promise to bridge the gap between the royal family and the people we serve, remembering always that I came from their ranks and that their hopes and struggles are my own. She held her stone gently, as if it were a living thing. I promise to use my position to advocate for those who have no voice, especially the children whose early years shaped their entire lives. I promise to show George, Charlotte, and Louis that being royal isn't about being separate from others, it's about being connected to others in service. Her voice grew more personal as she continued. I promise to support my husband as he prepares for kingship, to be a partner who strengthens rather than competes, who understands that his success is our family's success. I promise to remember that every choice I make reflects not only on me, but on the institution we all serve. Catherine placed her stone carefully in the holder, its surface catching the candlelight and seeming to glow with inner warmth. Princess Anne stepped forward with characteristic directness. As the king's sister, her promises reflected decades of royal service and the wisdom that came from a lifetime of putting duty before personal preference. I make this covenant, she declared with quiet intensity. In the year ahead, I promise to continue the work that has been my life's calling, serving organizations that improve the lives of children and communities around the world. I promise to do this work without fanfare or recognition, because the work itself is the reward. She selected her stone with the efficiency that marked all her actions. I promise to support my brother the king with the same loyalty I showed our mother and our father before her. I promise to speak truthfully to him when truth is needed, even when truth is uncomfortable. Anne's expression softened slightly as she looked at her grandnieces and grandnephew. I promise to help teach the next generation that royal service isn't a burden to be endured but a calling to be embraced. I promise to show them by example that useful work, done well and without complaint, is its own form of nobility. She placed her stone firmly beside the others, its solid presence representing the unwavering commitment that had characterized her entire life of service. Queen Camilla approached the ceremony with the careful reverence of someone who had learned to value traditions that weren't originally her own. Her position in the family had evolved over many years, and her promises reflected both her gratitude for acceptance and her determination to prove worthy of the trust placed in her. I make this covenant, she said, her voice carrying genuine emotion. In the year ahead, I promise to honor the memory of those who served before me while bringing my own gifts to the role of queen consort. I promise to support my husband not by trying to be someone else, but by being fully myself in service to the crown. She held her stone thoughtfully. I promise to use my position to promote literacy and learning, because I believe that education is the foundation of all other progress. I promise to approach every engagement with genuine interest in the people I meet, remembering that for many of them, a royal visit is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. I promise to help bridge generational differences within our family and our nation, bringing patience to conflicts and understanding to misunderstandings. I promise to be a grandmother who loves unconditionally and a stepmother who supports without trying to replace. Camilla placed her stone with special care, understanding that her promises were witnessed not only by the family present but by the spirits of all who had gone before. The Duke of Edinburgh, Edward, stepped forward with the quiet dignity that had characterized his approach to royal life. His promises reflected his role as both a supporting family member and an active working royal. I make this covenant, he said in measured tones. In the year ahead, I promise to continue serving the organizations and charities that have been entrusted to my care, approaching each commitment with the seriousness it deserves and the joy that makes service sustainable. He chose his stone with deliberation. I promise to support my brother and my family in all their endeavors, understanding that my role is not to seek the spotlight but to ensure that the important work gets done regardless of who receives recognition. His voice carried warmth as he addressed the younger generation. I promise to be an uncle and grandfather who teaches by example that quiet service and steady commitment are just as valuable as grand gestures and public acclaim. Edward placed his stone alongside the others, its presence adding to the growing foundation of family commitment. Now came the moment that touched every heart in the room. Prince George, at 7 years old, was considered ready to make his first formal covenant of service. Charles had debated this decision for months, consulting with family members and thinking carefully about whether such a young child should be asked to make promises he might not fully understand. But Queen Elizabeth II had been only 8 years old when she first participated in this tradition, and she had often said that some of her most important life lessons had been learned in this very ceremony. George approached the box with the solemnity of a much older person. He had been prepared for this moment through conversations with his parents and grandfather, and he understood that this was not a game or a performance, but something real and important. I make this covenant, he said, his young voice clear and determined. In the year ahead, I promise to learn what it means to be a good prince by watching how my family serves other people. I promise to be kind to everyone I meet, whether they're important or not, because Gongon taught me that everyone is important. His small hands held the stone carefully. I promise to work hard at school and listen to my parents and teachers, because Daddy says that being a good prince means being a good person first. I promise to take care of Charlotte and Louis because big brothers protect their family. George's voice grew stronger as he reached his final promise. I promise to remember that being royal isn't about being better than other people, it's about helping other people be their best selves. I promise to never forget that people are more important than crowns or castles or fancy clothes. With his grandfather's help, George placed his stone in the holder. The sight of his small promise joining the others created a powerful symbol of continuity and hope for the future. Princess Charlotte, at 6, was participating in her second covenant ceremony. She approached with confidence, having spent the year thinking about what it meant to be a princess in the real world rather than in fairy tales. I make this covenant, she announced with determination. In the year ahead, I promise to use my voice to help people who can't help themselves, especially children who are sad or scared or lonely. I promise to remember that being a princess means being brave enough to stand up for what's right. She selected her stone with care. I promise to be a good sister to George and Louis, to help them when they need it and to learn from them too. I promise to listen to Mummy and Daddy when they teach me about helping people, and to remember that the most important lessons aren't always in books. Charlotte's voice carried surprising maturity as she continued. I promise to use my creativity to make beautiful things that bring joy to others, because art and beauty are ways of serving too. I promise to never think I'm better than anyone else just because I'm a princess, because Grandpapa taught me that true nobility comes from how you treat people, not from what title you have. She placed her stone with ceremony, understanding that her promises would be remembered and that she would be held accountable for keeping them. Even 3-year-old Prince Louis was given a special role in the ceremony. While too young to make formal promises, he was invited to place a small crystal in the holder, representing the hope and potential that he carried as the youngest member of the family. William helped Louis approach the table, lifting him so he could reach the holder. One day, William whispered to his youngest son, "You'll make your own promises. Until then, this crystal represents all the love and hope we have for the person you'll become." Louis giggled as he dropped the crystal into the holder, clapping his hands as it caught the candlelight and threw tiny rainbows around the room. His joy seemed to bless all the solemn promises that surrounded his small contribution. As the clock approached midnight, the family stood together around the table that held their stones and their promises. The weight of tradition and the hope for the future filled the room like a living presence. "These promises we have made," Charles said, his voice carrying the authority of kingship and the love of a father and grandfather, "are witnessed by those who came before us and will guide those who come after us. They bind us not in burden but in purpose, not in obligation but in love." The final element of the ceremony was about to begin, and it would seal their commitments for the year ahead while connecting them to the unbroken chain of service that stretched back through generations of their family. The grandfather clock began its 12 solemn chimes, each tone reverberating through the blue drawing room like the heartbeat of history itself. King Charles stood at the head of the circle, his family gathered around the table that held their stones of covenant, their promises for the year ahead glowing in the candlelight like precious gems. As midnight arrives, Charles announced, his voice carrying both the weight of tradition and the warmth of deep family love, "We prepare for the circle of hands, the moment when our individual promises become our shared commitment." This final element of the secret tradition was perhaps the most powerful, created by Queen Mary during the London Blitz when bombs fell around Buckingham Palace and the future of the monarchy seemed uncertain. She had believed that physical connection amplified spiritual commitment, that joining hands while making sacred vows created bonds that could withstand any external pressure. The family members arranged themselves in a circle around the table, the youngest and oldest standing side by side in a configuration that emphasized their connection across generations. Prince Louis, now fully awake and sensing the importance of the moment, stood between his parents with unusual stillness. Princess Charlotte took her place next to Queen Camilla, while Prince George positioned himself between his grandfather the king and his aunt Princess Anne. "Before we join hands," Charles continued, "we share the resolution of purpose, our collective commitment for the year ahead." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper, its edges worn from handling. This document had been prepared in advance, crafted through months of family discussion and careful consideration of the challenges they would face in the coming year. We, the House of Windsor, Charles read, his voice growing stronger with each word, resolve to serve the people of our realms with humility, courage, and unwavering commitment. We promise to adapt to the changing needs of our time while preserving the eternal values that give our service meaning. William stepped forward slightly, adding his voice to the declaration. We resolve to bridge the gap between tradition and progress, understanding that our monarchy must evolve to remain relevant while never forgetting the principles that have sustained it through centuries of change. Catherine's voice joined the chorus. We resolve to use our platform to advocate for those who have no voice, to shine light on causes that might otherwise remain in darkness, and to demonstrate through our actions that privilege brings responsibility. Princess Anne's contribution carried the authority of decades of experience. We resolve to work without seeking recognition, to serve without expecting gratitude, and to find joy in the knowledge that our efforts make life better for others, even when that improvement cannot be measured or publicized. Queen Camilla's words reflected her unique perspective as someone who had found her place within the family through patience and dedication. We resolve to welcome new voices into our ancient traditions, to learn from those who see our work with fresh eyes, and to remember that authenticity is more valuable than perfection. The Duke of Edinburgh added his commitment with quiet intensity. We resolve to support each other in times of triumph and difficulty, understanding that our family's strength comes not from individual achievement but from our willingness to work together toward common goals. Even the children participated, with George declaring in his clear young voice, we resolve to learn every day how to be better people and better servants of our country. Charlotte added, we resolve to be kind to everyone and to never forget that everyone deserves respect and love. Little Louis, prompted by his father, managed a solemn, we promise to help people. Charles folded the paper carefully and placed it in the center of the table, where it would remain throughout the coming year as a reminder of their shared commitment. Now, he announced, we join hands to seal these promises. The family reached out to each other, forming a circle around the table with their joined hands creating an unbroken chain of connection. The moment their hands touched, something almost magical happened in the room. The flickering candles seemed to burn brighter, the shadows danced more gracefully, and a sense of profound peace settled over the assembled group. Close your eyes, Charles instructed gently, and feel the strength that flows between us. In the silence that followed, each family member experienced the tradition in their own way. Charles felt the weight of kingship lightened by the love and support that surrounded him. William sensed the confidence he would need for his future role flowing into him from his father's steady presence and his wife's unwavering support. Catherine experienced the deep belonging that had taken years to develop, knowing finally that she was not an outsider who had married into the family but an integral part of its continuing story. Princess Anne felt the satisfaction of a life well lived and the excitement of watching a new generation prepare to carry the family's mission forward. Queen Camilla experienced profound gratitude for acceptance and purpose that had exceeded her wildest hopes. The Duke of Edinburgh felt the quiet contentment that came from finding his proper place in the family structure. The children, in their innocence, simply felt loved and safe and important, surrounded by adults who took their participation seriously and who made them feel like valuable contributors to something larger than themselves. In this moment, Charles spoke into the silence, his eyes still closed. We are connected not only to each other but to all who have stood in this circle before us and all who will stand here in years to come. We are part of something eternal, something that transcends our individual lives and gives meaning to our daily choices. The clock finished its 12 chimes, and the new year officially began. But the family remained in their circle for several more minutes, reluctant to break the spell that had been woven around them. When they finally opened their eyes and released their hands, the world seemed somehow different, more purposeful, more connected, more full of possibility. Happy New Year, Charles said softly, and the words were echoed around the circle with voices full of love and hope. But the ceremony was not quite finished. Queen Mary had established one final tradition, the writing of intentions, where each family member would privately record their personal goals for the year ahead. These intentions were not shared aloud but were sealed in individual envelopes and placed in a special box that would be opened the following New Year's Eve. A small writing table had been set up in the corner of the room, complete with elegant stationery and fountain pens. One by one, the family members took their turn writing their private intentions for the coming year. These were deeply personal commitments that went beyond their public promises, goals for personal growth, relationship improvements, spiritual development, or private acts of service that they hoped to accomplish. Charles wrote about his desire to find better balance between his royal duties and his personal need for quiet reflection. William recorded his intention to be more patient with the inevitable mistakes he would make as he prepared for kingship. Catherine wrote about her hope to be more present in small moments with her children while still fulfilling her expanding royal role. Princess Anne's intention focused on making peace with the physical limitations that came with aging while finding new ways to contribute her experience and wisdom. Queen Camilla wrote about her goal to worry less about public opinion and trust more in her instinct for authentic service. Even the children participated in this final tradition. George wrote carefully about his intention to be braver when standing up for classmates who were being teased. Charlotte's intention involved using her artistic talents to create gifts that would bring joy to others. Little Louis, with help from his parents, drew a picture that represented his intention to be helpful and kind. Each sealed envelope was placed in the special box with ceremony, creating a collection of private commitments that would be revisited the following year. This practice had proven valuable over the decades, as family members often discovered that intentions they had forgotten about had somehow been fulfilled through unconscious choices and gradual growth. As the private writing concluded, the family began the gentle process of ending their sacred evening. The candles were extinguished one by one, each flame representing a prayer for the year ahead. The stones of covenant were carefully returned to their special container, where they would remain until the following New Year's Eve. The leather journal was closed and locked, its new entries joining the decades of family history that it contained. The children were growing tired now, the excitement and solemnity of the evening finally giving way to the natural rhythms of childhood. Before we part, Charles announced, we observe the moment of silent gratitude, 60 seconds to reflect on the gifts we have received and the opportunities we have been given. The family stood in their circle one final time, heads bowed in private thanksgiving. The silence was profound, filled with the weight of genuine appreciation for lives of privilege that carried real responsibility, for family bonds that provided strength for public service, and for the opportunity to make a positive difference in the world. When the minute ended, the formal ceremony was complete. But the family lingered in the blue drawing room, reluctant to let the magic of the evening end completely. They shared quiet conversations, gentle embraces, and the comfortable silences that come between people who know they are deeply loved and understood. William and Catherine began the process of getting their children ready for bed, though they moved slowly, understanding that this night had been special in ways the children might not fully understand for years to come. The adults exchanged meaningful looks and brief touches, a hand on a shoulder, a gentle squeeze of fingers that conveyed volumes about their shared commitment and mutual support. As the family gradually dispersed to their respective rooms throughout Sandringham House, each carrying the warmth and purpose of the evening with them, Charles remained in the blue drawing room for a few minutes alone. He stood at the window where the evening had begun, looking out at the snow-covered grounds that gleamed silver under the moonlight. The king reflected on the weight of the crown he wore, but, more importantly, on the love of the family who helped him carry that weight. He thought about his grandmother Queen Mary, whose wisdom had created this tradition during the darkest days of war, and his mother Queen Elizabeth II, who had added her own elements to make the ceremony even more meaningful. He thought about the years ahead, the challenges that would test his family's resolve and the opportunities they would have to serve their people. He thought about his grandchildren, who would one day stand in this very room making their own promises to carry the family's mission forward into an uncertain but hopeful future. Most of all, he thought about the simple but profound truth that had sustained the monarchy through centuries of change, that true leadership comes not from the power to command but from the willingness to serve, and that the strongest foundations are built not from stone and steel but from love and shared purpose. As Charles finally turned away from the window and made his way to his own chambers, he carried with him the peace that came from knowing that he was not alone in his responsibilities. The promises made that evening would sustain his family through the year ahead, just as similar promises had sustained generations of their ancestors. The secret tradition would remain hidden from the world, as it always had. But its effects would ripple outward through every public engagement, every charitable endeavor, and every moment when the royal family chose service over self-interest. The covenant they had made in the candlelit room would guide their choices and strengthen their resolve throughout all the days to come. In the quiet corridors of Sandringham House, as the new year began its journey toward another gathering in the blue drawing room, the echoes of their promises lingered like blessings, connecting past and future in an unbroken chain of love and service that would endure as long as the monarchy itself.